Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Kirby and the Amazing Mirror. In the last part, I think we got another one of the mirror shards. It's kind of hard to keep track, honestly. And we also got our first look at the Smash ability, which we're going to be keeping through the entire part, and I think even some of next part, because Smash is useful. Yes, it has a lot of attack options, but the thing I didn't quite go over last part is that a lot of its attack options can have secondary effects that other abilities do as well. For instance, it can hit the pegs with the rock or hammer versions of itself that those abilities can, to allow you to use those shortcuts. It can cut down strings and certain things that Sword and Cutter can with its equivalent to Kirby's Up B. It's a really good ability. I'd argue potentially the best one in the game. And I should note, I'm technically doing the only real bug in the game that I'm doing for this LP coming up here. You see, the equivalent to Kirby's Up B causes a little bit of an earthquake, which causes rocks like this to move slightly to the side. You're meant to call in all the other Kirbys and collectively do a hyper inhale to bring this towards you. But I can just move it in front of the door slightly and then abuse Kirby's hitbox by turning around in midair as I try to jump into this corner, because Kirby's hitbox is a little bit weird in that while you're turning, it moves in such a way that allows you to squeeze through this hole. Eventually, it can take a little bit of practice though, but you can do it. And I should note, if the block was any further to the right, I wouldn't be able to get in here to get that black spray there, as it would be blocking the door. So that is the furthest and easiest that can get. That takes some practice. I should note, though, the sprays, though, what those do, you can only use them in the main menu. They allow you to change whatever Kirby you're playing as colors into whatever you want them to be. Obviously, there's a set. I think there's like 16, 12, somewhere around there, different colors for Kirby you can do. You got the main 4, but then you got things like you can be the Shadow Kirby, which is the one I just got, which is, I think, it's called the Carbon Spray. It's cool that you can do that in case you want to do some minor personalization. Now, throughout the LP, I've obviously stated some minor frustrations with the game from a structural standpoint. And while I explore, I might as well explain what I mean by a lot of it. And I feel the Smash power-up's a really good example of what I think the game could have had. You see, what I like about Metroid games and the Castlevania games isn't just the raw exploring around. I'm also quite a fan of the sense of growth and progression you get through those games as you go. And in particular, what I mean is, say, like, you'll see a piece of level design that is meant to be gone around or destroyed with a certain ability later on. You'll experiment around with it, find yourself unable to break it, but then when you find that ability, it all just clicks in your mind. You realize, oh, I can go this way, or this way, or this way now. And due to this game's more open-ended structure, the game lacks that. And I feel a way they could have easily gotten that, while still retaining a little bit of the first Metroid for a younger audience kind of thing that the game tries to do, is make it so that as you progress through the game, maybe you beat certain boss fights that automatically give you their copy ability as a latent ability for Kirby. Obviously, you can't take away his flight, but maybe make it so that if you beat, say, a specific Bonkers variant boss fight, the giant monkey, that you get maybe something like a permanent hammer upgrade, or at least like a mode where you're constantly in hammer. Think of it kind of like the copy abilities in Milky Way Wishes, especially in Superstar Ultra. Because you could easily make it so that you could say, while jumping, do this button combo to do a hammer spin that you can use to break certain things. You can make it so that wheel, for instance, is closer to how a speed booster works in Metroid, where, say, if you're dashing for like a second or two, whatever the timer roughly is like that in Fusion and Zero Mission, that you automatically enter a wheel phase. I feel doing things like that, they obviously would have to structure the levels around it a little bit better, but I feel that would have made this game's exploration feel more rewarding, because as it is right now, it feels like you're largely just wandering around until you find what you're looking for, more or less. And I guess that is what the genre is at its base value anyway, but it's the progression that's also just as important as the actual exploration. Because even if you end up wandering around, you will learn information about what you could, or what you could and couldn't do, and what you might need for later on in games like Metroid or Time Spin or things like that. So when you finally get that ability, that clicking is an important thing, and I really feel like this game drastically is lacking in it. And there's other Metroids that lack that too, quote-unquote, Metroids in this case. Like, I liked Iconoclasts a lot. I thought that game was really fun. Albeit the story, holy shit, that got dark. But it was also drastically missing that sense of progression, partially because it was a more linear game anyway, but also because it was more so like, here's an area for area puzzle mechanic or something like that. And that's why I like games like Time Spinners, even though they might have their own individual problems. Like, Time Spinner is really just not reductive, but it's very much just Symphony of the Night. Again, it doesn't really do anything new. It's very, I guess the word I'm looking for is derivative. But it's still a fine structure at its base, you know what I mean? And it makes me wonder if there's a way they could have done something like I mentioned for Kirby to make that kind of series connection work, but at the same time, that would go so against the main mechanical ideas of Kirby, at least in terms of permanently having an ability, that it probably would have gained more ire than the game already has, because I know there is a substantial amount of Kirby fans who just don't like this game, and you know what? I get it. Because it is very all over the place in terms of what the game wants to be, what it does mechanically and all that. I still like it, but it's definitely one of those that I can definitely be like, yeah, it's not for everyone. Like, if I had to recommend someone a Kirby game on the Game Boy Advanced through DS era, ooh, what would I recommend, actually? I would recommend Canvas Curse, because I just like how different that game is. But would I recommend Superstar Ultra, Squeak Squad, or Nightmare? Nightmare has the classic and the remake angle, yeah, but its powers are very lacking. Squeak Squad and Superstar make it so that every ability has something of weight to it. I guess it would be Squeak Squad, because that's the most rounded package, I suppose, in terms of just what the main campaign wants to be. Because Superstar is a hodgepodge, and some people like that. I think it gets kind of distracting when you have games like Gourmet Race that count a lot to getting towards the end of the game, but are like 15 minutes long. And then you got things like Great Maze, which is very much not that. Yeah, I guess Superstar Ultra would be the Kirby game I recommend, though, in terms of that, but Squeak Squad's probably the best campaign, I guess is the best way to put it. Either way, that's the end of that pathway. I technically probably didn't need to go for the goal game, but oh well. Now something I'm not sure about with the goal games, and there's probably someone who's figured out what causes what with it. I'm not sure what causes how long you're in for the goal game there on the bottom right. Maybe it's the distance you are relatively from the main hub. Maybe it's the specific goal games that always have specific timers. I don't know. It's always felt super inconsistent. With that said, though, we're now going out of our way for a very particular area, and to do it, we have to not only go through Peppermint again, we go through this area a lot to get to other places, you may have noticed by now. But there's also a couple of chests I want to grab while we're here anyway, and all that jazz, because we're now heading to what is technically, numerically, the final of the last area. The final of the main areas, rather. And it's easily the hardest to find out how to get to, because I think only 2 places in the game allow you to access it, and one of them is at the tippity top of Peppermint Palace. Honestly, in a way, I wouldn't have minded going back to the topic I was talking about earlier. Say if you started the game with default Kirby, but as you beat certain bosses, you basically just become Smash Kirby. That could have been really interesting. And that would have been a very Sakurai move at the time too, because this game, this particular Smash set is based particularly off of Kirby's Melee self, which is interesting to me because that is the worst Kirby has ever been in Smash so far. But it ends up becoming the best ability, I would say, period, in this particular game. And I think what's interesting is, I think after this, Sakurai started focusing more on Smash and other series more often. Because I think this was the last Kirby game he was credited as heavily involved in. Moving forward, I think either it was when he left HAL, founded Sora. I forget exactly what happened in what way, but he was less directly involved with Kirby moving forward, besides, I think, just signing off on, all right, yeah, you can do this, or something like that. I feel what's a big problem as well with Amazing Mirror's level design is that there's a good amount of times where there's just kind of straight up trial and error. Like, okay, you hit this bomb block, which means you can't go through that door and blocks you off from this treasure chest. Too bad you didn't know that. Now come back to this room and try again. And there's a little bit of that in mainline Kirby too, don't get me wrong, but in a Metroid-like, it feels especially dirty. Mind you, I say that, but it's not like Metroid technically doesn't have those kind of areas too. Thanks to the crumble blocks, for instance, in Metroid Zero Mission, Super Metroid, and Fusion, because those just don't allow you to reach certain missile tanks should you miss a jump in certain cases. Like, I'm particularly thinking, in Super Metroid, the room near where you find the wild Etacoons that teach you visually about wall jumping. You can miss the E-tank, the energy tank over there, super easily if you just mess that jump up over that little invisible pit. Also, I believe the gray golems are a bit different in that they give you the wheel power-up instead of stone, so hey, that's cool. With that said, once we grab onto this star, we are now on our way to the final of the game's main areas, and I think barring maybe Radish Ruins, the only one we haven't really entered at all. Welcome to Candy Constellation. I love the music here. And this is, without a doubt, the most complicated area to get around on its own right. There's a lot of times you have to loop backwards on pathways and all that. It's definitively meant to be the final of the main areas, quote-unquote. And it's probably the area that visually sticks out the most to me, although in a lot of ways it reminds me oddly of Blaster Master Zero's final area, a part of Super Paper Mario, and Subspace Emissary. Now that I think about it, in general, Amazing Mirror structurally is very similar to the Great Maze at the end of Subspace Emissary and Brawl, because you can go anywhere in there. There's only a few times where you're blocked off in progression by having to fight this particular boss to go through this room. I wonder if Sakurai and the Brawl team used any experience on working on this to inspire their work on Subspace. I can see that totally being a developmental story for Brawl. I wouldn't doubt it is. I have no way of saying if that's true or not, but now that I think about it, that is... Also, probably some of the more precise movement things you have to do in the game right here. Like this little thing where you have to hit that switch and quickly get in there. Just for another sprite, though that is one of my favorite ones. You got a lot of tighter switches. This is... It at least feels like there's meant to be some sort of difficulty curve with the game, I will say. In that I feel... In terms of area complexity and stuff, the later numbered areas tend to be more complicated to get around than the early numbered areas. But again, because the game allows you to go anywhere, kind of makes it feel pointless, and also gives the game kind of an odd difficulty curve. Now, this is what I meant by back and forth, because that block that I just broke made it so I couldn't go the upper route in that previous room. And the only way you can do that, which I believe is necessary if you want to beat the area, is to break that peg right there with one of the stone abilities around here, or they can go back there. It's weird, but I like this area. Actually, now that I look at it, this particular room also reminds me of something else as well. Some of the rooms here remind me of the lower section of Sector 4 in Fusion. The underwater area with the really good underrated music track that if you're super precise, you can just speed booster all around and skip getting the diffusion missiles. I've always loved that secret. I think at this point in my life, I've only done it like once or twice. Also, we get a relatively interesting item here. That was the CD player. That allows you to listen to the game's entire soundtrack. Assuming, at least, you found the required key item sheets. There are some songs, and I forget if it's like unlocked percentage by percentage, like each sheet unlocks multiple music tracks or what, but it allows you to, you need to find them to listen to the music, plain and simple. And you should, because this game's soundtrack is incredible. Candy Constellation is easily my favorite song in the game. That's just because, A, it has that bombastic intro that I really like, but it has a very... What's a way to phrase this? Almost like late Genesis-y Sonic tone mixed with some Mega Man energy at points. It's a really nice song. Also, in some ways, it reminds me of Mario Galaxy, but that might just be the bombastic intro that does that for me. We hate Fan. Fan's annoying like Boxy Boxer or whatever the hell the dog's name is, in that he can just grab you out of whatever you're doing sometimes and twirl you around and yeet you into the trash can, and there goes your perfect run. With that said, not a bad enemy to inhale because I believe he gives you the throw ability, which is just really good. Also, I don't think I've talked about those yet, but outside of just briefly mentioning them earlier on, it's something you can find in chests. But that was a health up. It raises your health by 1 point. I believe you start with 4 and end with, I forget if it's 8 or 10. It's one of the two. I can't quite remember which. Want to say it might be 8. In which case we are... Actually, no, I think there's at least one more I haven't gone, so maybe it is 10. I don't remember. To be honest, Kirby HP isn't something I really pay attention to. There's something I do really enjoy about this area, though, otherwise, is that it actually feels like something you have to go out of your way to find compared to a lot of the other areas where you can just kind of mess around and you'll eventually find your way there. You have to go such specific routes to get here otherwise that it really feels like an accomplishment when you eventually find this place. I think growing up, when I played the game, I forget exactly how I went about the game, but I know I ended up here last or super late into the game. I want to say what I tried to do as a kid was figure out the numbered area I was in and try to go through them in actual numerical order. Because that is totally something young me would do, try to be like that, but nowadays not really much of a reason to do that. Oh, hey, Boxer. Just talking about you a second ago. Oh, you're just gonna grab me, okay. Oh, and there's another ability they could have done to make the game feel more concrete in structure. Make it so that maybe you start the game losing abilities in one shot like a classic Kirby game, but maybe after being like King Golem, the first ability you get from beating King Golem even could have been like a natural shield that makes it so you don't lose your ability unless you get hit by a super hard shot, or you take 2 or 3 hits. That could have been great. And also a nice way to introduce the game structure slowly, because you had to do that little linear section at the start of the game. Could have been cool. That's all I'm saying. But they went for what they did, and you know what? It's still a valid approach, just irritating to people who like the genre like me, I suppose. And even then, not every person's gonna feel like I do. Because we all have opinions, and each of them are shit in their own way. That was a very cynical way of saying that, but with that, I'm gonna need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 5, more Candy Constellation. See you guys then.